Hello friends, my name is Ryan. I'm going to tell you a story named The Cabin in the Woods, Trapped in a Forest of Death, which is a very amazing story full of twists. So let's start. There was once a group of friends, 4 in total, who decided to get away from the chaos of their daily lives. They wanted to disconnect from everything, to recharge in the quiet of nature. After weeks of searching for the perfect getaway, they stumbled upon an old cabin deep in a secluded forest. It seemed to promise peace and solitude, away from the prying eyes of the world. Little did they know, this cabin held a secret, one that would change their lives forever. The friends, Jack, Emma, Liam, and Ava, arrived at the cabin just as the sun was beginning to set. The trees surrounding the cabin were thick and twisted, their branches almost resembling skeletal hands reaching out to grab anyone who dared to enter. The air was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. But no matter how ominous it seemed, they dismissed it as just the typical spooky atmosphere of a forest. They were here to have fun. As they settled into the cabin, something about the place felt off. The air felt heavy, like the house was suffocating them. The wooden floors creaked beneath their feet, and the walls seemed to whisper as the wind blew through the cracks. But they shrugged it off, thinking it was just an old house settling. They sat around the fireplace, telling stories and laughing, trying to forget the unsettling feeling that lingered in the back of their minds. That night, as they went to bed, the silence of the forest seemed to grow deeper. The wind howled outside, but it felt like something more than just a breeze, it felt like a warning. They each slept fitfully, disturbed by strange dreams. Jack dreamt of being chased by something in the woods, but when he tried to run, his legs wouldn't move. Emma dreamt of a figure standing at the cabin window, its face hidden in shadow. Liam and Ava both heard strange noises in the middle of the night, scratching at the door, low moans coming from the walls. But when they looked, there was nothing there. The next morning, things took a darker turn. They woke to find the door of the cabin wide open, even though they had locked it the night before. The forest outside seemed darker than before, and the sunlight barely filtered through the dense trees. They tried to brush it off, but the atmosphere had changed. They had been warned, but they didn't know it yet. Later that afternoon, while exploring the woods, they came across an old path, one that didn't appear on any map. It was barely visible, overgrown with vines and shrubs. But curiosity got the better of them, and they decided to follow it. As they walked deeper into the woods, the sounds of the forest seemed to fade away. There was no bird song, no rustling of small animals, just a chilling silence. They walked for what felt like hours until they reached a clearing. In the center was a large stone monument, weathered and ancient, with strange symbols etched into its surface. Ava, the most adventurous of the group, stepped forward to touch it. The moment her fingers made contact, a sudden rush of wind swept through the clearing, and the earth beneath their feet seemed to tremble. Before they could react, the ground gave way, and they plunged into darkness. They landed hard, their bodies bruised but miraculously unharmed. As they stood up and brushed themselves off, they realized they had fallen into an underground cavern. The walls were lined with strange markings, symbols that resembled the ones on the monument above. The air was thick with a musty smell, and the only light came from their flashlights, casting eerie shadows on the walls. It was then that they heard it. A low, guttural growl, echoing through the cavern. The hairs on the back of their neck stood up as they turned toward the sound. From the darkness, a pair of glowing eyes stared back at them. And then, out of the shadows, a figure emerged, tall, gaunt, and covered in tattered robes. Its face was pale and hollow, and its mouth hung open as if to speak, but no sound came. Before they could react, the figure lunged at them, its hands like claws reaching for their throats. They ran, but the cavern seemed endless. No matter which direction they took, the figure was always just behind them, its growl growing louder, more frantic. Finally, they found a narrow tunnel and squeezed through it, emerging back into the forest. They were disoriented, unsure of where they were, but they could feel the presence of something watching them, following them. They ran toward the cabin, hoping to find safety within its walls. But when they arrived, it was different. The cabin no longer looked like the place they had arrived at just days before. The windows were boarded up, the door was ajar, and the forest surrounding it was thick with fog. They rushed inside, only to find that the cabin had changed. The walls were covered in the same symbols they had seen in the cavern, and the air felt even heavier than before. It was then that they realized the truth: they were not alone. The cabin, the forest, the cavern, it was all part of something far darker than they could have ever imagined. As the hours passed, the group became more desperate. The figure from the cavern was now inside the cabin, watching them from the corners of their vision. They tried to leave, but every time they opened the door, they were met with nothing but darkness. The forest had swallowed them whole, and they were trapped. It was then that they understood. They weren't just trapped in a forest, they were trapped in a curse, one that had been placed on the land long ago. The figure, the growls, the strange markings, they were all part of the curse. And there was no escape. As they huddled together, trying to make sense of what was happening, the door to the cabin creaked open once more. This time, there was no wind. No growls. Just silence. And standing in the doorway was a figure, the same figure that had chased them through the cavern. It didn't speak, didn't move. It just stood there, watching them. And in that moment, they knew that they would never leave the cabin. They were trapped, forever. The story of the cabin in the woods isn't just a tale of suspense, it's a warning. A warning about the things that lie hidden in the darkness, waiting for someone to stumble upon them. If you ever find yourself in the woods, and you come across an old, abandoned cabin, remember this story. For the forest has a way of keeping its secrets, and once you've discovered them, there's no turning back. If you've enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and stay tuned for more chilling tales that will keep you up at night. Stay safe, and remember, not everything is as it seems in the darkness.